Thank you for tuning into the Class B football playoff predictions. My name is Drew Rhoades.
And my name is Peyton Parker.
And today we will be going over which teams we see making the playoffs and where they stack up. So, at the number 16th seed, I have Granite East. Granite East is currently 2-5, but has Lincoln Standing Bear in their Week 8 matchup, which will result in a win for them because of a forfeit. In Week 9, they match up against a solid Seward team at home. I think with a week off to refresh the legs and a game at home that Granite East can pull off the win and finish their season off 4-5.
At my 16, I have the Ralston Rams. They have two crucial games coming in the weeks for their playoff likelihood. Platt Smith and Hastings are both teams that they have a chance of taking down, and if they could sneak a win in against either of them, that would comfortably seed them in the playoffs.
That's a good pick. All right. For my 15th seed, I have Gross. Gross has 3 wins so far, but they will be playing Buena Vista next week, which I see them winning, but a loss will be falling against a good Scott team to finish 4-5.
At my number 15, I also have Gross. They were the last year's state runner-up. They've been on a slight decline this last year with only 3 wins. If they could prove themselves with a win against Scott, I don't think it's likely, but if they could do that, they would bounce way up in the rankings.
That's a good pick. Number 14, I have Crete. But is playing a very tough Norris team this upcoming week that I see resulting in a loss. They match up against a new Buena Vista team in Week 9 that I see them winning. They will end up 5-4 with this win.
At my 14, I have Scotts Bluff. They're coming off a tough 1-point loss last week. They look to bounce back in the playoff picture with 2 easy wins against Gearing and Lexington.
So in my 13th seed, I have Elkhorn. They started off the season very well with wins to Norris and Gross, but hasn't been hot ever since. They showed their potential, and I think they could finish the season out 4-5.
My 13 is Crete. They have a 4-3 record, and with a win against Norris, they could bounce up, be a top 10 team potentially, and Buena Vista should be a good boost for them heading into playoffs.
In my number 12 spot, I have Scotts Bluff. With being 3-4 now, Scotts Bluff is on a current 4-game losing streak, but all of those losses have been to pretty good teams. I think they will win their last 2 games to finish their season off 5-4.
At my 12 seed, I have Elkhorn. You might be surprised they're up here with 2 wins, but they've played top 10 competition the whole year, with 3 of those losses being in my top 5. And they have an easy schedule ahead with Mount Michael and Westview.
At number 11, I have Seward. Seward has a great start to their season so far, and they have a dominant season so far with a 5-2 record. The Week 7 game was a shutout loss to a solid York team that finished 27-0. With that being said, I think that negative momentum will lead them to a loss against a 7-0 Waverly team and a team that has been under the radar in Week 9, Granite East.
At my number 11, I also have Seward. You might think it's a little weird because they're 5-2, but obviously that loss against York significantly drops them. And if they can battle back against Waverly, they could come back up into the top 10, but I don't think that's likely.
At number 10, I have Blair. Blair had a lot of hype behind their name at the start of the season, and their 0-2 start did not help that. They're currently 4-3, and I see them beating Westview in Week 8, but then losing to an undefeated Elkhorn North team to finish out 5-4.
At my number 10, I also have Blair. They played a very close game with Platt Smith, losing in overtime. Blair has played 2 top 10 teams and will play Elkhorn North in their final week. If they could beat Elkhorn North, that would be a huge upset and really shake things around. But once again, I don't know if that's likely.
Me neither. My number 9, I have Norris. Just like Blair, I feel like they had a lot of hype behind their name at the beginning of the season, but then they lost some pretty close games, leaving them 4-3. With Crete and Pius X left to play in the regular season, I think those are 2 winnable games.
At my number 9, I have Hastings. Last week was an expected win, but it was closer than a lot of people would have thought, only winning by 1. They round off the rest of their season with Ralston and Gearing, which should be easy wins, solidifying them as a middle-of-the-pack playoff team.
I have Hastings in my 8 seed. Just like Peyton said, they have a current record of 4-3, but they have asserted their dominance against the teams they have beat. They have a good Ralston team to play in Week 8, but I see them getting the win, which will lead them to a Week 9 win against Gearing to end 6-3.
At my number 8, I have Norris. They have good wins against Blair and Waverly, or not a win against Waverly, but a very close game with Waverly. It's a competitive team that has a chance to be a dark horse in the playoffs.
At my number 7, I have Grand Island Northwest. They haven't been a team that has been talked about a whole lot this year, but with a sneaky current record of 4-3.
At my number 7, I also have Grand Island Northwest. They've had an under the radar season with impressive wins against Seward and Hastings, and their last week matchup against Gearing was a close victory for the Vikings, but it should give them some momentum in the playoffs, into the playoffs.
At number 6, I have York. Despite York having 2 losses, they have a pretty hard schedule and should be able to win the last game of their season.
At my number 6, I have Elkhorn North. They're 7-0, but they have 2 tough games ahead, and they could probably drop both of them. Best team they've played so far is 4-2 Crete, with the rest of their games being played against competition much inferior to them. I mean, they've kind of had a cherry-pick schedule.
Yeah. And that's why I put Elkhorn North at my 5. Yeah, they are undefeated right now, but I don't see them being very high just because based off their schedule. But their last 2 games are against Bennington and Blair, which are 2 tough teams, just like Peyton said. Those are both going to be a challenge.
At my number 5, I have York. 2 losses, but both against top 4 teams in Waverly and Bennington. Last game was an easy win against Lincoln Northwest. Should give them some momentum coming into the playoffs.
Yeah, my number 4, I have Plattsmouth. They are 6-1, but they play Scott in Week 8. This will be a very, very good game that I can see going either way, but I still have Scott on top. The rest of the schedule after that should be very winnable.
At my number 4, I have Waverly. They have a very good passing game for a Class B school, and they should easily win out with Seward and Lincoln Northwest as their final 2 games.
In the number 3 spot, I have Omaha Scott. Scott had a very controversial loss against Bennington in Week 1, which should have rattled them more than it did. But they responded nicely and went 6-0 since. Despite having a tough game against Plattsmouth in Week 8, I still do see them getting the job done going into the playoffs.
My number 3, I have Plattsmouth. Their only loss is against Bennington by 1 score. They play Scott this week on Friday, and it should decide the 2 and the 3 seeds. And then their final game should be a breeze by Ralston.
All right, in the number 2 spot, I have Waverly. Waverly has been nothing but dominant this year. They handled business in Week 7 against Gretna East with a 46-6 win. Seward could cause them some problems in Week 8, but they should handle business against Lincoln Northwest.
My number 2 is Scott, coming off a 55-point victory over Ralston this week. Or last week, excuse me. This week's game will prove the hype of this team if they can come out with a victory against Plattsmouth.
And in my number 1 seed, I have Bennington. They have been dominant with a 7-0 record as of now, and the rest of their schedule is very winnable against current undefeated Elkhorn North team and Mount Michael.
Yeah, at my number 1, I also have Bennington. They've been dominant all year. They're the reigning champions. Their upcoming game against Elkhorn North could be challenging, and they should easily pass Mount Michael with no difficulty.
All right. In my championship game, I see the number 1 Bennington and number 3 Scott matching up against each other, resulting in a Week 1 rematch. I think the result will be flipped, and Scott will end up victorious.
In my championship game, I have number 1 Bennington versus number 4 Waverly, with the reigning champion Bennington Badgers on top.
Thank you for tuning in to the Class B playoff predictions. My name is Drew Rhoades.
And I'm Peyton Parker.
Have a great rest of your day.